All right, so I watched this interesting video where it stated that Floyd Mayweather Jr. ruined boxing for black people because he had this undefeated record, and since then, a lot of the black fans, especially Black American fans, are looking at undefeated records, especially for their fighters. Now, this is the interesting part. I know a little bit about boxing history, and it is true that before Floyd Mayweather Jr., especially if you look at the 90s, nobody really cared about undefeated records. You could be George Foreman, you could be Evander Holyfield, you could be Bernard Hopkins. It just nobody really cared about undefeated records. When Floyd came to the scene, he revolutionized everything because he was the first promoter. Well, technically it was Oscar de la Hoya, but Floyd Mayweather Jr. took it to a whole different level, and that was that he decided to make it his own way and not rely on promoters and basically get paid more money, right? And the strategy was to market that undefeated record that other fighters before him did not market. Like Finito Lopez never marketed that undefeated record he had, right? He also was 50-0 with a tie, I believe. Joe Kosagi also had an undefeated record, but he never marketed it as such. You had people in the past like Rocky Marciano who never marketed that undefeated record. It was marketed for him, but he never really used it for business purposes. He had Packy McFarland before anybody else did, right, during the Iron Age. And he was the fighter that avoided Joe Gans, interestingly. And he was also undefeated as well. And probably he was the most, if you're talking about undefeated being the best, he was probably the one during this time that, had that greatness because he was undefeated. But there have been other fighters too. Underwood became undefeated in the end of the day. There was a lot of fighters that, in the past were undefeated as well. But Fleming with the Jr. was the first one to market it. Now, the video stating that a lot of the black fans are looking at these undefeated records and now they're saying, well, if you lose one fight, now you suck, you no longer are worthy, and XYZ, right? But here's the reality. The reality is that it's not just black fans. It's just also Latinos. Is pretty much everybody. In fact, most of the people that left boxing and went to the UFC left to the UFC because now the sport is run by undefeated records, and you can see a lot of people not just talking about undefeated records, but not all, but also talking about money, and this includes Latinos too. There's a lot of people, especially in the United States, Latinos, because Latinos make a big fan base in boxing. They're one of the biggest fan bases where they actually believe in getting paid. And you don't have to go to Floyd Mayweather Jr. to do that. You can just go to Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez has been pretty much the hegemon after Floyd Mayweather Jr. retired. He is being talked about. He's commercialized. When he could have fought Demetrius Johnson, he had all these options. He could have. He says he picks whoever he wants to fight, and he himself chose a path where he felt like certain styles of boxing just didn't benefit his style because styles make fights in the end of the day. And after that, he decided to market himself as the best Mexican superstar. Well, the media did it. He was also kind of white and Latino, and that really helped his image as well. A lot of more indigenous people like David Benavidez will never really make it to that level of Canelo Alvarez. That's why, for example, Ryan Garcia can afford to lose a couple fights, and he still will be a super commercialized boxer. But if, for example, another Mexican fighter lost who's more indigenous than he will be forgotten. So being white actually makes a big difference, especially in the sport of boxing. And we've seen this since the Iron Age, since the days of uh, fighters like Terry McGovern. We've seen this throughout history of boxing, right? In fact, the Black Murderers Row, they were pretty famous during their time, and they were avoided, right? Because a lot of the white fighters and even black fighters didn't want to fight them either, right? They were that good. But it's always happened in the sport of boxing, so this is nothing new. But being white does market. And what you see in a lot of conversations, for example, if I said, I think that Demetrius Johnson actually would have beat Canelo Alvarez. But the answer always is no, Canelo will destroy him because Demetrius Johnson has fought bums, right? That's the argument. But my counter argument is always this is like, well, he was a triple champion. He had three belts, right? And then when you tell that to Canelo fans, just as an example, they will say, well, yeah, but he didn't fight anybody. Okay, but Mujia didn't fight anybody either. Rocky Fielding didn't fight anybody. Also, Canelo gave him a rehydration clause too. I mean, if you want to talk about fighting anybody, just look at John Ryder. He never had three world titles. So they're saying that undefeated records, if they're destroyed, then black fighters or black fans will stop following that fighter. But in reality, when I look at the entire community of boxing, which is pretty much garbage nowadays, they don't even care about the belts. If Demetrius Saunders had three belts, that's pretty good. But he doesn't make enough money. He doesn't call the shots. He's not the A side. So this A side, B side bullshit is just something that Latinos do as well. When David Benavidez fights, or he tried to fight Canelo Alvarez, right? What was the excuse for a lot of the Canelo fans? He doesn't make enough money. He doesn't call the shots. Wait, hold on. Where's this argument coming from? Because if you go back to the old days, right, nobody said that about Michael Moore. Nobody said that about any of the fighters when they were coming up and fighting against other fighters. When James Toney fought John Ruiz, like nobody was talking about, hey, he's the A side, B side. Just the fight happened, right? This is the problem with boxing today. So yeah, do black fans abandon their fighters if they lose? Yeah, some do, but the Latinos do the same thing over and over again. But at the end of the day, they will all follow their fighters at the end of the day because they represent their skin color. And that's a fact, right? I follow fighters because they're American fighters, but a lot of them follow them because, hey, they say, oh, he identifies more like a Mexican fighter. And I'll be like, well, he's really born in the United States. He's not really Mexican, but they identify. So it doesn't really matter whether he wins or loses. You're still going to back that fighter up. Now, whether you buy a pay per view or not, well, that's a whole different ball game because that's when you put your money in. Maybe you're more interested if the fighter is undefeated. But the problem with today's boxing is not just exclusively that black fans have abandoned their fighters because they're not undefeated. No, Latino fans have done that for a long time. In fact, they give excuses. In fact, another thing you'll see in boxing too is that styles make fights, and the Latino style of fighting is more primitive in the sense that when they fight, they're more one dimensional, especially Mexican fighters who are born in Mexico or Latino fighters in general. A lot of them, they don't want to face black fighters because black fighters have a different style that sometimes they can't match. Black fighters rely more on IQ, and a lot of the Latino fighters rely more on pressure and punching, right? Like, let's say a lot of the fighters like Navarrete, right? They rely on that physical strength, right? No different than Christian and Billy, for example, who puts a lot of pressure, right, and tries to like break you down. So when you're fighting a high IQ boxer who knows the rules, who knows how to clinch, who knows how to break you down, not having too much power, then that breaks down the opponent's mind. They don't know how to react to that because you're using your IQ versus sheer force. And technique always wins. So a lot of the Mexican fighters, a lot of them, they don't want to fight against black American fighters. This is the fact. But do Latino people say, oh, why are you not fighting this guy? No, the excuse is he doesn't make a lot of money. He's boring. He's XYZ. So the destruction of boxing, if you really think about it, has pretty much come also from the Latino community. And they might not want to admit it, but that's the truth. If you look at UFC, right? And I hate to say this, but there's not, I mean, there are some Latinos, but I mean, the fights over there, they take place. They don't talk about money or he's making more cash and, he's undefeated. All these talking points are coming from the boxing community, whether they're blacks or Latinos, it doesn't even make a difference. And that's the sad part. So saying that, Floyd Mayweather Jr. ruined boxing, yeah, you could agree with that because he did kind of market the undefeated records. So Latino fighters want to be undefeated too, because they know that if they lose the record, their promotional company will pretty much abandon them, and then they won't pay as much attention, right? That's why Sufa boxing for me is important. Now they're in the boxing game because I think they can make a difference, making it more like the National Boxing Association before it became the WBA, and then the WBC came in 1961. So for me, as a boxing fan, I want to see just fights. Styles make fights. But at the end of the day, you can't just say that one group is worse than the other when the other group is just as bad. Okay? The talking points of today's boxing, whether Latino, blacks, or whoever it is especially in America, is making money. Who's made more money, which is a ridiculous point. It sounds like an escort. Only escorts care about your wallet. And also undefeated records. Oh, he doesn't deserve it. Bro, if everybody fought everybody, they all lose. Everybody will lose. Eventually, everybody will lose. Even Floyd Mayweather Jr. If he were to fight everybody, right? Because he ducked Winky right. He had a chance to fight Winky, I remember, for undisputed title. But he wanted to give him a rehydration clause, right? Whether you agree with that or not, that's true. I mean, Canelo Alvarez gave rehydration clauses too, right? The same modus operandi, right? Same kind of dealing, same kind of trajectory, right? That's the truth. But it's just funny to me how the boxing scene works. For example, Ryan Garcia tested positive for PEDs. Wow, you would think that's terrible. But they didn't. The Latino community cheered for Ryan Garcia. Oh, nothing to see here, just a little trace. If I get that little, if I test positive for a small trace in my job, I get fired straight up. But it's Ryan Garcia. Maybe he's a little whiter. Maybe we make an exception with him. Maybe he has uh, you know a better reason why to be excused, right? And then everybody's criticizing Devin Haney, who obviously got the short end of the stick in that fight, right? But why would you cheer for Ryan Garcia? See, this is what ruins boxing at the end of the day, because it's also a racial war, and unfortunately, boxing has like before. It used to be like just boxing. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not racial shit going on in the story of boxing, especially if you go back to the past in the golden era age, 1930s, 1920s. Yeah, there was a lot of that. But in the end of the day, like it's just it's not really about it's the mentality of boxing that's changed, and that's universal. Everybody is shift to very strange talking points. They're not really related with competition. Now it's related with money and business. And I'm gonna tell you one last thing. I know a little bit of promotional contracts. I know how they work, and in the end of the day, they want to admit it or not, no promotional company. This is illegal. You can look it up. Can force any fighter to take any fight he doesn't want. That's why the Muhammad Ali Act was so important, because it gave the boxer the opportunity to make money. But unfortunately, it's become so depraved that now boxers are avoiding each other. And that's why HBO left at the end of the day. They saw that Floyd was gone. They said, nope, we're out of here. We know what's going to happen. They could kind of project what's going to happen. Showtime left, ESPN, a lot of the bigger networks, they're not in the game anymore because they knew that that model will destroy boxing. But that's just what it is. So it's about fighting, competition. But we already are model ourselves to believe that, oh, it's the promotional companies. Like we almost made like the promotional companies fight each other. Promotional company, it's just promoting. It's like advertising. That's all they do. They get a room. It can be a ballroom. It can be anything. As long as they can make the fight and have a couple of chairs there and a few chairs and sit down and get some beer, they do all that stuff. The manager just works with a fighter so he can get a fair deal, works behind him. That's what it is. But the fighter has to sign the contract. If you don't want to sign the contract, the promoter has to look for options. They always look for options, and the fighter has to accept what option he wants. But why do most fighters are not taking the fights? Because the fighter, whether it's especially Latino fighters, let's not lie here, a lot of them, they'll look at the fight and say, I'm not fighting this black fighter, and I don't want to lose my chance to have a world to gain a world title, especially fighting him for a low pay. So they won't sign the contract. This is the problem with boxing. But guess what? The black fighter will do the same thing sometimes. Look at another black fighter and say, I don't want to take the fight. That's what happened with Devin Haney. And now he's trying to get that fight with Shakur Stevenson. I love Devin Haney. I think the dude is a warrior. But that's what Devin Haney, right? He's not getting no fights because he has the balls, and some fighters just don't have the mental fortitude to fight him. And that's the truth. And that's a fact. And like Navarrete, going up each division, trying not to fight anybody he could. Jaime Munguia was doing that for a long time. He avoided Demetrius Andrade too. Why did he avoid him? Because they don't want to lose. This is universal. So it's not about being black. It's not about being Latino. It's just the the mentality of boxing nowadays has really shifted into a zone or into a world that is just far removed from reality. If you're I want to see the best fights. If you're talking about business, I don't give a shit. I don't care if the fighter loses or not. He's there to fight. He's not there to make the better business. You're not, see, people want to put themselves in these fighter shoes. Bro, these fighters don't pay your rent. They make a lot more money than you ever will. But if you're not fighting the best fights, if you're not taking the riskier fights, then what's the point? You can't have 4 world champions. There's only one World Cup, right? There's only one NFL trophy. There's only one, basketball trophy. There's not 4. And many of these fighters, they don't want to unify. They don't want to take, if there's a tough mandatory, they'll move up in weight and be like, hey, you know what? I don't want to take this guy, so therefore I'll move up in weight. So, it seems like, they're trying to move up in weight and make good fights there. Bro, it's just so fucked up. That's why, this is the realest channel on YouTube. All right, give us a like, subscribe, become part of our community, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace out.